Okay, round concave layers. So that's what we're going to work on today. And in haircutting, that's just kind of a technical name for what's going on within the haircut. So when we say round, what we're really thinking about is the fact that it's actually lighter through this front area, opens up the face, and it either follows the head shape or it kind of descends into the back and gives that kind of rounded feeling to this area. What it will do is it will always expose the face. It's always going to open up this area. See, a round shape affects what we see this way, horizontally. So what we're going to see anytime that we do a shag or face framing or wolf haircut, whatever it is you're going to open up this front, whether it be a frame down here or a frame from up here. You're going to open up that face. And then if you use over direction or if you use an angle that gets heavier towards the back, then you're going to see that weight descend into the back and leave this back much heavier. So you don't have to do that. You could follow the head shape, and then what that will actually do is it will actually keep a more kind of level weight line as you work around. And what you can do is as soon as you get through into this back area, utilize a little bit more over direction so that does drop off. Again, pull away from what you want to keep. So when we are working this haircut, obviously it's round and it's concave layers, right? So what is concave layers and where does that live? So the shape we just talked about lives horizontally, right? So when we work horizontal sections, we will cut a line that gets heavier towards the back or follow that curvature in that rounded part of the head shape. Now, vertically, what that means, concave layers, is that it's going to be lighter on the inside, so lighter through this area, but heavier down through here in the perimeter. If you could think of like a triangle or a Christmas tree, right? It's just a big triangle, isn't it? So that's kind of concave, but it's only one concave. See, if this is convex, where we follow the vertical contour of the head shape, then as soon as we start to put more length down here, then that's going to become more of a concave. It's working against the head shape now. And that can work all the way through, all the way up. Keep going. Keep it shorter on the inside and much longer on the exterior so you protect more of that length and you keep not all of the weight, but a lot more weight down here and remove it through the top. So it's a very skinny layer. So that's what concave layers are. Generally, it's going to be lighter on the inside, heavier towards the exterior. So you can determine which extreme you want to create based on elevation and fingering. So let's get started. So the kind of fundamentals that you want to think about when you're doing this haircut is, how do you want to approach it? If we approach it vertically through the haircut, or do we approach it horizontally through the haircut? I'm going to do both, so I'm going to explore both for you. So the first thing you have to think about is what's the density like for your client or for your model that you're working on. Not everybody comes in with the same amount of hair, so what you have to realize is that not everybody can have the same variation of round concave layers. So it's not a one size fits all. So what I would do is I would think about, is the hair fine? So if that client wants that kind of quintessential kind of face frame through here, get a little bit longer and heavier into the back behind that shoulder, then we can use a lower elevation if they have fine hair. Because we've got fine hair, what I don't want to be is I don't want to be up in this area, removing all of that weight from the top, and then leaving not much there in the bottom area, that fine hair area. So I'm going to do a couple of variations for you just to work on these different densities. So fine, medium, and thick hair. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to establish a perimeter. The mannequin is fresh, so it's got no haircut whatsoever going on in here. So I'm just going to kind of establish a perimeter from this length here in the front. So we'll just strengthen up this. And now I'll work that into the back. So we're talking like hair that is longer than the collarbone. So again, if you're just joining in, what we're going to work on is we're going to work on round concave layers, and we're going to work a few different variations of these round concave layers based on density. This is a haircut that, and technique, excuse me, that we start with in my Knowledge Destroys Fear class. And there's so many variations of round concave layers. And these are three variants that I like to work on based on density. So right now we're going to pretend that we're working on somebody that's got very fine hair. So again, what I don't really want to be doing is I don't want to be working in elevations like this and removing too much of this weight. Whenever you remove weight, it's obviously going to come from the top. So it's going to affect everything from the outline to the interior. But it's going to affect that outline immediately because you're taking more weight away from it. So then it starts to get more transparent. It doesn't react how you want it to react. So instead of working up here or up here, we're actually going to work in a lower elevation. Think of what graduation does. It builds that weight. It encourages hair to kind of turn under and bevel in. So what I first want to do is I want to identify where the hair is that falls on the face. And it's in this area here. You can see where the hairline just stops becoming horizontal and then becomes vertical. Right, so that's that frontal area. It literally just split there naturally for me. So that's that little triangle area that you would use to create a fringe or bangs. Same thing on this side. All right, so it's coming from right at the front point of the apex. That's like sectioning off the nape right at the lower part of the occipital ridge. All right. So you have to remember that this part of the head shape is pretty much identical to this. So we'll just isolate that area. And what I will do now is I'll just kind of get rid of this. See, if my client has fine hair, then I really don't want to be doing too much to this hair here. So I'm not really looking to bring any of this forward. I'm looking to maintain density in this area. So I establish my outline, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut the hair in this area. First, I'm going to take this, and I'm going to use this part of the head shape as a kind of a gauge or a guide for elevation. So that will help me to kind of keep it lower, and I'm utilizing that natural curvature of the head shape. So I'm stood directly in front of the nose here. And when I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, okay, well, this parting in the middle, that's like the middle of the street. So I've got one side of the street, the cars go one way, and I've got one side of the street, cars go a different way. So what I'm looking at in this is I'm looking to stay in my lane. And I'm just going to stay right on that natural frontal area. So when I comb this, those lines you see in the hair, they're just pointing towards me. They're not pointing towards the other side of the street. They're not coming over here to maybe where the sidewalk would be, right? So whatever visual it helps for you to understand. So I use that part of the head shape, and then I can see this length down in here. That's that length down in this area, all right? So I'm kind of going to use that as a guide to work off. That's going to allow me to definitely keep my length. So again, using the head shape as a gauge for the elevation, looking for that length down in that area, and taking that corner off. So the angle of my fingers is going to be the steepness of this angle in this particular area. So what I'm doing is I'm actually framing according to what length I have. So if I wanted to take the framing shorter, then I would angle my fingers even more. But I have to be careful, because the more I start angling, the more I'm going to start to scoop that hair. And I really want it to be more kind of how it would naturally fall. So you can see now, when I shift that over to the side, that's just framed that front area. So now what I'll do is I'll just connect this little corner into the rest of the length. So I'll work from the apex down to behind the ear now. And I'm going to just let that calm down. And then I'm going to work my fingers this way. And now I can work into the length at the bottom. So now I've just framed that front area. Now, one of the things you have to be aware of is you see how it kind of like comes in a little bit, doesn't it? So this hairline, most people's hairline, it comes up into a natural recession, and some people's are even deeper and further up there, aren't they? And then what it does is it comes down. So when you look at that on the profile, you see what happens. So what it means is you've got a tremendous amount of weight and hair in this area, but you don't in that area. So it's giving the illusion that this kind of gets a little heavy. So if you don't get the right angle to begin with, this is really going to start to come in through here. Now, there's naturally more weight in that area now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this piece, the piece that I started with, and now I'm going to move myself across the other side of the street. And I'm literally going to face this angle right here. So my shoulders are facing that. My feet are in a position that puts me right in front of that. So when I pull that to me, I'm moving it perpendicular from that line. And I'm just going to take this little corner off here. So there's my length in the sides. You see how that drops away? Right? So I'm actually going to cut parallel to that now. And I'll take that excessive weight in that area away. Some of you guys may have seen me do that on one of my reels. And really, see now what that did is it really took that in and enabled me to get that bevel in that area. So very basic, very simple face frame. But again, this is for somebody that's got fine hair. So you can see on the mannequin, this is quite a weak area. So if I start cutting into this by pulling everything forward onto this, then I'm going to affect this. This doesn't fall in the front, so I have no business bringing it in there for now. So now, what I want to work on is somebody that has a little bit more density. So what we will do now is we'll use a higher elevation. So now all I have to do is just set the haircut up for me. So I'll work the front first, and then I'll work the back afterwards. See, now I'm going to actually cut into the back so that I get a little bit more reaction from the hair. Again, fine hair before, I didn't want to touch anything other than just this front corner. Now, I can afford to take a little bit more weight out of the interior in this, but not too much. So my elevation is going to move up, but it's not going to move into this area. So now what I'll do is I'll just split the back into two areas, the nape and this crown moving into the top area. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue to use the existing length that we've got. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually pull this panel forward now. And I'm going to work it in stages so that I don't cut too much at one time and the hair doesn't get in the way. So I'm literally taking this top area and moving that out for now. Think of it like this. I'm going to cut the wall first, and then I'll work into the roof or the ceiling of what I'm going to cut. So when I look at this, when you can look at this, what you'll notice is the head shape gives you this. Right? So both sides, that's kind of like an archway, isn't it? So essentially what I'm going to do now is instead of pulling it down here and cutting that archway down there, I'm now going to lift the hair up and pull it directly forward and just cut the arch into it. That's it. That's how I'm going to get the frame. So essentially I'm going to cut this vertical area first, then I'll move into the curvature and the top afterwards. So we'll use the length down at the bottom as the guide. So looking at this length down through here, and there it is. So that's the length at the bottom, right here in the front of the hairline. So if I use that, I protect that. If I move past it, then I really protect it. So if you're looking for a little insurance, go a little bit further. Do you know what I mean? So I could just let that drop away, then I know I've guaranteed that, and then I just take that corner off. Now my fingers are going to cut flat, and then I'm going to continue that flatness all the way through as it moves into horizontal. Now, if I wanted to make my face frame shorter and more layers on the inside of this haircut, then I'm going to change that angle. I'm going to work more inverted, definitely more into the interior and taking more weight out. So the archway that I can cut that flat, I can cut it inverted this way, and I can technically cut it graduated like I just did earlier and not use as much low elevation. So I'll let that fall. And now we're layering more into this. We can see more reaction with that wave. It's starting to want to flick. Now, as I move into the top, I'm not elevating into this area, so it's not going to be as soft when it falls. It's going to have a heaviness to it. So now I'm stood directly in front of the head shape again. And now I'm going to take this parietal area and I'm going to continue that flat angle up into the top. So my fingers are trying to kind of mimic the head shape. Moving through this last piece in the top there. Now I'm definitely more horizontal and I'm cutting the top part of the arch. So this is the inside of the haircut. Those are the shorter layers. Then we get longer into the exterior. So you can see now how that affects it. But you can see we still have quite the bevel through this top front area, and then through this area wants to flick more. That's because the sides, the vertical part is layered. Through here it's layered, but it's pulled down. So when we look through this, because of the head shape's curvature this way, you'll notice that this hair is technically longer than this hair at the front of the hairline. So it's actually allowing me to create a bevel when that falls. Not as heavy as a graduated bevel, but as you can see, I've got that flat layer in there. So if I would have pulled this top down, then I would have had a more graduated angle, more bevel, right? So you can see that it's kind of that in between. It wants to bevel and it also wants to flick. So again, I'm working on somebody that's got a kind of medium density of hair here, so I want that. I don't necessarily need to come through this area and layer too much. So now the back panels, all I will do is take this quadrant, or third, and again, I'll do the same thing. So I'll work the more vertical part of the head shape first. Again, this just gets that out of the way so I can work this part, only this part, not worry about this getting in the way. So again, I'm looking at the lines in the hair as I comb it, and what I want these lines to be kind of parallel to the ground. So I'm bringing whatever reaches, not much that reaches. All right, so this mannequin obviously comes with layers in it. So whatever reaches onto that front line, and as we can see, that starts to layer a little bit more of this inside. So now moving that through into the top. So again, this is still very controlled and it's still maintaining weight. It's not removing a great deal of weight as we get through into this top area. So we're going whatever reaches onto that front line, and we've got bits. Try not to pull this hair down. Because of the head shape, you're going to want to pull that down. So ideally, the mirror would be here so you could see your elevation as you work through that. So let's look at that when we let that fall. And we've got that kind of shag shape starting to happen. You know what I mean? That kind of long shag. So again, it's got a little bit more weight in there because of that hairline. So I'll do the same thing that I did earlier. I'll just take that piece from the front of the apex down to about where the hairline becomes vertical. Again, I'm going to go across the street. I'm going to thank Mr. Robert Cromings for that terminology. Working across the street. So now I can see I've got an even bigger corner in that area now. So let's take that off. So now you see how that kind of just helped in that front area. So we've got no kind of point or peak in the middle there. So that's working on a kind of medium density of hair. So we're starting to see a little bit more reaction now with that texture. So now let's work on somebody that's got lots of hair, all right? So we can afford now to work into the inside with a higher elevation. So now I'm going to actually do a variation of the shag. This is the classic way of doing the shag, the Vidal Sassoon shake. So working with that round forward graduation or concave layering that it actually became. Bless you.
Thank you.
How's it going?
Good.
Good. So if you're just joining us, we are working on round concave layers or shag shapes kind of variations. So working from like your standard face framing layer variation into a little bit more kind of a lighter variation and then full on. So what I'm doing now is I've got a vertical diagonal section from top to bottom, all right? So moving into the hairline comes in and then down, so it requires us to take a clean vertical diagonal section behind it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into that same body position. I'm going to go into the front. And now what I'll do is instead of pulling the hair forward, now I'm going to lift the hair up. So think of what we've just done. We've just created this kind of like archway or tunnel entrance, whatever we want to call it, doorway. And now we're going to do the similar thing, but we're going to lift the hair up towards the ceiling. We're not going to lift it up straight up to the ceiling though, right? So again, I want it lighter in the front and to get slightly heavier towards the back, right? So if I lift this up towards the ceiling, then I'm not really going to achieve shorter in the front, heavier in the back. As you can see, when I lift that section up, the front of this section kind of gets over-directed to the back end of the section, right? That's from lifting it straight up. So what that's actually going to create is it's shorter at the back, longer at the front. And that's already heavier in this area, so I don't really need any of that excessive peak of weight there. So what I'll do is I'll just now work straight out from the head shape. So instead of lifting it up, pull it straight out. So place my comb on the head, and there's 90 degrees in that particular area. So I'm going to bring it to that. Now, obviously, you can see that all this hair is being lifted up towards that spot, up towards this area. So what that's going to do is it's going to make it shorter on the inside and longer towards the exterior. So now all I have to do is look at where my length is right here. This shortest piece that I see there, that's my length. So now I can take the interior out and I can maintain my length. So you can see I've gone shorter on the inside and longer towards the exterior. So if I would have cut this and then cut more flat this way, then I'm going to leave more weight on the inside. When that falls over, you're going to see that bevel more. So look at the reaction of the hair compared to what happened when we were working with lower elevations. You can see the hair doing this. That's called curtain or feather or flick. That means layers. So it's encouraging the hair to fall lighter. So, welcome back. So now what I have to think about is I have to think about what do I want to happen getting back towards that back area? So yes, I want it to get heavier towards the back. So I've got some options here. How heavy do I want it to be? So if I really just want to concentrate on all the action being through this front half of the head shape, then I'll over-direct everything forward into that first section. So let's do that and let's have a look at it. So with it being that first section and I'm going to bring everything into it, that means it's a stationary guideline. So it means my sections can actually be much bigger when I'm over-directing to a stationary point. So maybe instead of taking one section, I'll take two sections so that I can get through this much quicker. That's the beauty of working with a stationary guideline. It does make haircutting much easier. It's when we start to travel with that guide that haircutting becomes difficult. And that's where most people will struggle in haircuts, is when it's moving. When it's stationary, it can become quite easy. I think we see a lot of the videos like that as well, stationary guidelines. So there's my guide in the front. So there's my exterior length. So now I'm able to take that weight out of the inside. So I stay where number one is, and I pull this forward. You can see that over direction happening. So I'm pulling away from what I want to keep. So it's going to get heavier in the back. Pretty simple stuff. So now look, you can see as it falls, it has that feather, that curtain, that cascading, concave effect. So now we'll keep going. Sorry, just in front. So again, I don't need to take like one section. I can take maybe two sections. So the size of two sections. It's going to help me get through the haircut much quicker. Again, it's a stationary guideline, so I can do that. I can take bigger sections. So a lot of hair, right? So if you're one of those that struggles with holding all that hair, break it into sections, just like I broke it into sections moving up earlier. See, what I do is I grab all of it, or whatever will be pulled towards the front. Whatever falls out will fall out. And I kind of just work on getting the hair in the right place first. So letting the comb do the work in my hand. Then once I've got it into kind of the area it needs to be, just combing that forward. And I'm only going to cut from fingertips to knuckles anyway. So if I don't want to go past that second knuckle, I can stop there if I want. And I can kind of just use this as storage for the rest of the hair, right? And then I can move into this hair now if I want to. Or you could just cut it all at once. Again, more experience, you have more control. Last piece. Same thing, everything's coming forward into number one. So you can see how I comb that hair. So the underneath, the vertical part of the head shape, I'm combing that forward and around the head shape. And then where it starts to become more horizontal, the top part of the head shape, I can just comb that along the head shape again. So I'm combing everything forward. I'm not just bringing this up and forward. Getting everything onto that first section. So now that's the heaviest it can be using over direction onto that first section. So you can see the drop off of weight. Let's have a look at the layers on the inside. So look at the layer in the front, right? There it is through the front. So now because of all that over direction, our layer in the back is down in that area. So we've got quite a drop off with that. So what that does, it obviously is going to create the illusion that this is pulling you back a little bit. It's going to flatten this area. So really in a shag, you want more layers throughout the interior. So over directing it forward doesn't give you the classic shag. It kind of gives you the shag mullet variant. You've got front that looks like the shag and then the back is just heavier. So what we have to do now is we have to change how we over direct the hair so that we can change the density of layers in the back. So if I go back to the beginning, section number 1, all right, and I now change my over direction. So I've already cut number 1, we've seen that, it's good. So that's my guide. Now I will take section number 2, same size. See, now I'm going to travel. I'm going to bring the hair into the previous. So section number 2 will go into number 1. Then 3 will go into 2, and 4 will go into 3, and 5, and so on until I run out of hair. That's over-directing into the previous, and that's going to make it get slightly heavier towards the back. So I've already brought number 2 into number 1 before because I brought everything forward onto number 1. So I'm just going through the motions in these first 2 sections, just skimming over. So now this is where it changes. Instead of bringing number 3 and number 2 into number 1 now, I'm going to get rid of number 1. And I'm going to take number 3, same size as number 2. All right? I want them to be the same size all the way through. If not, it's going to change how much over direction I use. When you change over direction as you're moving through, then there's an abrupt change in trajectory of that weight line. So now I bring number 2 straight off the head, and I bring 3 forward into 2. And this is where I'm going to see a little bit of weight because this got brought into number 1. Now I can see the difference. So now I take section 3 and I get rid of number 2 and number 1. So a very classic way of working a round concave layer, working through with vertical diagonal back sections from front to back and pulling the hair forwards, either into the first section or into the previous. Fluidity is key, so I'm making sure I'm bringing everything where it needs to be. So my guide is straight off the head. And now you can see that excess weight that's about to come off. This was brought into section number 1 to begin with. So you can see now how I'm starting to affect the weight in the back that I maintained earlier by pulling everything forward. So now my over direction is forward into the previous section. So now we're going to start to see more layers, shorter, lighter, happening through this part of the head shape now, not just through the front face frame area. Next section, same size, same thing. So down into the hairline now. Previous is my guide. So now, again, I'm going to pull forward into the previous. So here's my previous section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my shoulders and I'm going to face that guide. So now I'm going to bring the hair that's about to be cut into the guide. I'm not going to twist the hair, I'm just bringing it to the guide. Right? So the guide's not being twisted. The hair behind it is being twisted and brought into it. You can see that forward over direction into that previous section. So again, I'm maintaining all the length that this mannequin has. And I find that that's a very important factor when we're layering. It's all about what happens with the length. So now these last few sections in the back, I'm going to have to pivot my sections off the crown to make sure that they're vertical diagonal. Previous section. So I'm pivoting more through these back sections. I'm moving more through the back sections. So the side sections are like this. They're back-to-back vertical diagonal sections. When you get to the crown, they're then pivoted around. So go to where my guide is. My guide angle is right there. So I face that. and I pulled this forward into that guide section. Nice and clean. The hair on this mannequin is super soft. It cuts really nicely. These mannequins are from Evo. And they're really good. And we've used the Fab Pro and Stano on them to make them pink and purple and peach. So now again, face my guide, shoulders facing the guide. This last section will then be brought into that. So again, I've over-directed forward onto my previous. And look at how much more weight comes off the back now. So those long, heavier layers are now a little bit shorter, aren't they? Quite a bit, actually. So bringing that forward into the previous has changed how much weight we have kept in the back. So my weight gets heavier now, but it's not super low and heavy. So let's look at the difference between the layers in the back and the front now. So there's, yeah, much better. So that's how we work a kind of classic vertical diagonal kind of shag concave layer. It's not the easiest though. That looks good, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one little thing I would want to do is I want to take that front area, like we've been doing, and just take that corner off. See it? Done. Just lighten that front area a touch. And I could customize this front even more, however I want. I've got the shell of the haircut here now. I've built the house, now I would want to start to decorate it how I need it to be. So I get it as close to dry as possible and then start doing all that kind of stuff. So, you know, it's starting to do its thing, isn't it? So, let's cross-check it. Let's have a look at that. Cross-checking, we go the opposite way, so we work horizontally now. And what we're looking at here is we're looking at each one of those sections being brought forward. So this part of the haircut was cut up in this area, wasn't it? It wasn't cut over here, so I'm going to check it in that area. And what I'm looking at is I'm looking at the cleanliness of the line from front to back here, the fluidity of that line. So I've just taken that little corner off there in the front. So what I'll do is I'll just skim that so there's no harsh corner between the two areas. And as I look through here now, I can see that I created a trajectory that gets heavier towards the back. So I've created a horizontal distribution of weight, getting heavier towards the back. So my over direction achieved that. So when I cut the first variation of this higher elevation, I pulled everything into number one. So what we could imagine would happen is that angle would be much greater. It leaves a lot more weight in the back. So over directing forward is kind of a good insurance policy so that you don't go too short with your layers. Try that first. If it's too heavy, then go back through and adjust. The thing is to cut with intent, to be in control of the haircut. So now working through that entire front panel, top panel, and just checking the fluidity of that line from front to back. So just skimming over any little bits that you see that you don't like. Working into the side. I don't really need to keep taking minimal sections down into that. I can just lift this panel up now and have a good look at that as well. And again, you can see that angle that has been created by my over direction as I moved around the head. So it's fun, but it's not the easiest way of doing it. See, right now, there's a whole other side of the haircut that's not been cut. So yes, we've just achieved it on this side, but then what you have to do is you've got to go and achieve the same thing on the other side. right? So that's where haircutting becomes even more difficult, right? You have to balance a different side to it, right? I'm all on balancing myself, right? So trying to balance the haircut can sometimes be quite difficult. Now, I want to make it as easy as possible. So if I was going to cut this side the same as that side, now it becomes difficult because the section size and placement has to be identical. And it's really difficult to make, it's easy to get it to start here at the same spot and to finish maybe at the same spot as the other side. But it's what's happening on the inside of that line where the angle goes, and that's what changes, right? So if it's not exactly the same as this side, then you will cut this side slightly differently. So that can cause it to fall differently and flick a different way or turn under a different way. So, you know, it's really not your client that has one side that does that versus the other. It's you kind of cutting that into it. So we have to try and cut it identical. So I just showed you how to cross-check the haircut. So essentially, I could cut this haircut horizontally instead of vertically. So when I do the other side now, all I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that line. And I'm going to push every single section into the center. So what I am going to do is I'm going to split it into 4. I'm going to go from the apex down to right behind the ear. I'll do the same on the other side. So that kind of just cuts out a lot of that hair, so you have more control. I haven't done anything with the perimeter on the other, this side. I'll do that later. We'll match it up later. Right now I'm going to use the inside as the guide for the haircut. So if you notice right now, I've actually moved over onto the other side of the head shape. This is not where I would want to stand. I wouldn't want to work from the back down into the front. I want to work with the flow of the haircut where it gets longer. So it's much easier for me to work shorter to longer this way than it is to work longer down to shorter. All right? Your body position doesn't really want to do that. So turn yourself around, or turn your model client around so that you can cut this and let the body do it for you. See now, how my arm moves, it enables me to create that. It enables me to go to a longer length. So what I'll do is I'll take the first section on this new side and a piece from the other side as a guide. Now, I already have another side done, so I know that this is going to do what it needs to do. So here's the guide. I'm going to follow that guide. So I'll work from this angle, and I will take that little corner off later. So there's the guide. So now you see I'm actually cutting into this much quicker. Right? There's more hair that way than there is that way. So I'm actually addressing this first, and I can bring minimal sections into that. Whereas I'm taking a little slither, and then I'm taking another section. So more sections equals more opportunities to make mistakes. Right? So I'm kind of working smarter, not harder in this sense. So now I created a concave angle like so on this side. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a elevation into that first section. So everything is coming towards the center. Next section, same thing. Now it's a stationary guideline. So just like I did when I pulled everything forward, I can take larger sections. So I don't have to take those small individual sections. I could probably take 2 sections at a time. So again, I'm bringing everything into that first section. So ideally my mirror is going to be right in front of the client so I can see where my elevation is. So I'm elevating the hair into the first section. Now I can take this piece and just bring that into it. Again, I haven't done anything with the outline on this side, and I will cut the length towards the end. So now looking, so I'm just doing a little hand check, just so it kind of gives me peace of mind. Really what I want to be looking at is that. I don't necessarily need to be measuring, but I know we like to do that so we have peace of mind within the shape. So it's in there. The only thing I would do later is just pull that over and take that little corner off like I did on this side. So you can see the difference between that corner in the middle right now. It's leaving it very heavy on this side, but we've pretty much got the same balance all the way through here. I'll cut the length at the end. So now all I have to do is I have to continue into the back. So this is the side that's been previously cut. So I will use, again, a piece from the other side as a guideline. So a couple of things, locations for classes and stuff like that. My class in Austin is sold out in October. We still have a class in Sacramento at the end of October, October 28th, that's available. That's Knowledge Destroys Fear with Evo in Sacramento. That's my last class of the year in the US. I'm going to be in Burlington, Vermont on September 29th. I'm going to be in Portsmouth, New Hampshire on September 30th with my friends at Sullivan Beauty. So you see what I did there is I just used that back end as the guide, just like I used that front end. So now I'll continue and do the same exact thing. Take that piece from the front, and then take the same piece in the back. Again, we're bringing into the middle, so I'm going to get rid of the other side now. It's not needed. Make sure that I have the right guide all the way through, because I'm going to bring everything into the middle. So I'll make sure that's the middle. So I take a piece through the front as well, just to make sure that the kind of fluidity is there. So I'm not just cutting the front and the back independently, I'm kind of making sure there's a connection and fluidity between the two. So again, bringing into that first section, keeping it easy, nice and simple. It's a stationary guideline. That means I can put my foot down and get to the destination a lot quicker. So whatever reaches into section number 1. Again, I've cut the front, I'm now blending and joining the back into that. So again, the last thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this little corner off the front, and then I will cut the length. So again, let's look in that area, that frontal area, right where the hairline starts to become vertical. Stand over on the other side. There's the corner. So then look through that middle now. We've got the frame. The last thing I'm going to do before I cross-check everything on the inside is just join these two lengths together, these two sides together. Again, I have a outline on the other side, and I don't on this side yet. I wanted to talk about another awesome event that I'm going to be a part of, and that is the Harebrained Festival, HB Fest, and that's September, I think 21st, 22nd, 23rd. That's in Palm Springs. There's an insane lineup of artists that are going to be educating there. I'm really proud to be a part of it, and I'm really looking forward for us all to be there. So if you're looking for a really cool weekend of nothing but haircutting, colour and all that business, styling, business, motivation, wellness and all that kind of stuff, come see us in in Palm Springs at the HB Fest. It's going to be rad.
Or Vegas.
Yeah. Don't come see us in Vegas, we won't be there. Also, I have a class in a couple of weeks actually that's just kind of popped up. Just booked a class in Riverside for July the 8th. I usually take July off, but I'm going to the UK for the second half of July, so I opened up a date to do another class locally here in California. And I'm going to be in Riverside, California on July 8th. If you're interested in taking a class with me here in Cali, that's a great place to go. And it's one of the only classes available other than Sacramento in October. So if you want to come see me and cut hair with me on the 8th of July in a couple of weeks, follow the link in my bio or go to my story. I just posted it up there. Anyway, let's have a quick peek through. This is the side that I've just done. So let's have a look through the inside of this and see what's happening. Remember, the previous side I actually physically cut this way. I over-directed forward to the front. And you noticed I cut a line that's shorter on the inside and got longer towards the exterior. So I've literally just done the same thing as this, but in a different manner. So again, a haircut, like I've been saying, is like GPS. It depends on what mood you are in and how quick you want to get home. So I could do one way, which is probably the longer way, the more scenic way home, and probably the most challenging way home, or I can work it more horizontally and I can actually get home pretty quick. So those are the two kind of variants of the same technique that we worked on. So I'll make sure that this will get dried and we will put the finished look up on my page. I'll make it into a reel. Thanks guys for joining me. We'll come back next week for one, and we'll see you there.